Welcome to the Reconnected podcast, a home for sharing, understanding, and growth for the retail grocery store industry. During each episode, we will meet an amazing member of our community as we learn about their story and jointly explore the intricacies and challenges of our supply chain. Through it all, we'll remember and honor that everything starts with the real people who spend so much of their lives supporting the retail food supply chain. We will bring together the voices of manufacturers, distributors, and retailers as we journey together to help our industry reconnect. My name is Luke Abbott, and I'm excited to have you join us. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Reconnected podcast, where I am joined today by the illustrious Bryan Reed from Mother's Markets, where you serve as Senior Director over Grocery and Wellness. Thank you for being here. I'm laughing at the beginning here because we recorded an entire podcast. I think you were on your phone, and we had a technical difficulty. We lost it. We started recording again here, and then we lost internet using the system we used to record. So now we're on Zoom recording to my computer, and nothing will stop us from getting this conversation out to the masses. Just know this.
Unfortunately, we wasted all of our brilliant thoughts.
Yeah. So that's just going to be us like shooting the bull,
right,
and hanging out. So maybe it's actually going to be better.
Hopefully.
Yes. So I'm grateful you're here. I'm grateful for your friendship. I first met you when probably before, but I think maybe when you worked at Sprouts, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got to know you much better when I worked at Jimbo's and you were there in grocery. And even better since you've gone to Mother's. And you're one of the people that I admire the most in this industry. And I'd say a couple of things before we start digging in, letting you talk, is I find you to be humble yet wise. And it's like you don't go out pounding your chest about things, and I don't see you having to be right. You're open, right? You're open to whatever the truth is and to feedback, and
very often wrong. So
yeah, right. There's a pleasure to work with, and I'm grateful that you're part of our industry. And I asked you to be here because of that. I think you're one of the good guys in our industry, and I think it's fun to share with our audience today some more of your story and your thoughts on the industry and where things are going. So are you up for it? We'll dig in again.
I'm up for it. And likewise, I feel similarly about you. I appreciate your friendship first and foremost, and I appreciate having you in the industry and being somebody that I can certainly bounce things off of, and I certainly do.
Awesome. Thank you. And now we get to do it in public. So we get to understand the dynamic of our relationship, which will be fun. So let's dig in. Your story. So obviously I mentioned Jimbo's, mentioned Mother's, but I think you started off when you were like 15 or something, right?
Yeah, so I started at 15. So basically got a job bagging groceries for a company that was then called Boney's, which would eventually become Henry's, and then eventually become Sprouts in sort of a roundabout way. So, obviously I didn't aspire at 15 years old to stay in the grocery industry my whole career.
What did you want to be? Like, you're growing up, what was it?
Well, when I was growing up, I thought I would be shortstop for the San Diego Padres. And when that fizzled out, I figured I would probably, I bounced somewhere between, I thought I might go to law school at some point in time. I thought I might go to business school, do something in business. I thought I might teach history because I'm somewhat of a history buff. So I kind of meandered, between different hopes and dreams, and it's probably in part why I never left the grocery industry. I just never quite decided exactly what I wanted to do, but I was enjoying what I did and continued to advance in my career, and at some point in time looked around and realized that was my career. But I mean, I started at 15, just to get a job. I was towards the latter part of my freshman year in high school, and wanted to have some cash in my pocket, wanted to save up and buy a car when I was 16 years old. And so, it just started to be something while I was going to school, and continued throughout high school. By the time I was a senior in high school, I was doing things like coming in to open up the store at 4 a.m. to do load crew, working load crew for 4 hours, and had like a 0 period work experience class where I didn't have to go to campus So I would work until about 8 a.m., leave and go to school, do the day at school, and then come back in the afternoon and close down the store. And
at a very young age. So
senior in high school.
that's a lot of trust
at this point
to have in
I
you
think,
at 17, 18 years old.
Mhm.
That, and you said when the crew you were on in the morning was, what was that called? Loading crew?
Load crew.
And
So
that
we would
means
get
like you're receiving the load from
receiving in the Mountain People's truck
on people
at that time.
for you in a five.
Offloading the pallets and working the grocery and dairy load.
Okay.
And then store opens up at 8 o'clock, and off I go to do the school day, and
Wow.
then come back in the afternoon and close down the store as the evening grocery clerk.
Cool.
And then after I graduated high school, I got keys to the store to be the closing manager.
So it's like at 19.
This is like probably 18, 19 years old. I'm starting college locally at Palomar College, one of the local colleges here, and so it was kind of like an extra closing manager without a specific title.
But the trust to have the keys to the store.
Yeah, right? I think that, yes, I think I earned a certain amount of trust with the store management team during that time that, probably most people I knew at, 17, 18, 19 years old weren't necessarily probably interested in or earning that level of trust. So, but I think for me, kind of early on, I think even going back to being 15 years old, I think that there was something different about being at work versus like going to school. There just was a different feeling to it. Like I always liked work. Like I always it was, there's probably a million things that I would rather have been doing at 15 years old, 16, 17. But when I was at work, it never felt like it was a drag. It always felt like it was, like the time went by, I wasn't really the type to sort of be screwing around and getting paid for it. Like I enjoyed doing work. I enjoyed being relied upon. I enjoyed, even though I was pretty shy person during those days, still to a large extent, pretty shy person. I did enjoy the customer interactions, probably in part because I think it forced me to sort of come out of my shell and talk to people, talk to a lot of different people. I enjoyed getting to know a lot of different personality types that you experience working in the retail world, and I just liked working. So I think from there, I just, I guess it just kind of got its hooks in me a little bit, and
you're good at it,
and
you like it,
and kind of never looked back.
And so your income probably, because you're basically closing the stores down. You became you said that you had the keys by graduating.
Yeah, so I think I was probably 18 or 19, and then they promoted me to what they call the fourth manager back then, which most typically was like the closing manager. You're closing down the store.
Got it.
Putting the tills away, locking up the store, having ready to open up the next.
But not necessarily the most fun shifts for a lot of people. You got to be home with their families, and you didn't have a family to get home to, so it's perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And then from there, I kind of started getting promoted pretty quickly. And up to that point, I'd done cashiering, I'd been a bulk clerk, I'd been a dairy clerk.
Okay, so you worked the entire store.
So I kind of worked in a bunch of different areas of the store, and I think it sort of kind of started the path, kind of gave me a good foundation for just understanding how all the different areas of the store operated.
But also the respect of the people you work with too, because they know you've done their job.
Yeah, I think that came in handy for sure as I moved farther up the ranks, and I got promoted pretty quickly to a third manager. Was probably 19 or 20 years old at the time. And then I think inside of a year became an assistant store manager. And I think at that point I realized, I don't really know how long I'm going to be in this business for. It still wasn't in my mind what I was going to do 10 years from now. But I knew that at that point, like, okay, well, I'm going to run a store. I want to be a store manager because I want to experience what it's like to be responsible for, 80, 90,
Sure.
100
I mean,
people.
that's the highest echelon within a store that you
Yeah,
can
I
achieve.
mean,
Like,
I
let's
think,
go for it.
yeah, and I think I didn't necessarily have it in my minds that I was going to do anything beyond that point, but I felt like, I think for one, it's something that would be good to have on my resume to have run a business.
Yeah.
Two, it's, I just wanted to personally see that I could handle that challenge. It's I think it's not necessarily the most glamorous thing in the world to be a retail store manager, but it's certainly challenging, certainly a lot of personality types that you have to manage. And you are managing a business at the end of the day. And so, I think in my minds, I felt like I wanted to experience that. And it ended up coming much quicker than I expected it to.
Yeah.
And then from there, it just, again,
So how old were you at store manager level?
So I was 22 when I ran my first store.
And which store was that?
So that was the Point Loma Henry's.
Oh my gosh, that's like a monster of a store. Like,
yeah, and that was actually there was during the early 2000s there was a grocer strike, and
I totally remember that.
Probably remember this.
My business as a distributor went crazy with all the independents.
And it literally happens the week that I took over the store. So, trial by fire.
The business like doubled.
The business literally doubled overnight. We could not get product on the shelves.
Wow.
We had, we've got the fires going on in LA right now. Unfortunately, we had pretty similar fires going on.
I remember that.
During that point in time in San Diego County.
It literally
was like half the county felt like it was on fire. We had employees displaced and trouble staffing the store. This is all.
I never heard this story before.
This is all happening within probably a few months period of time, and I'm trying to figure out how to manage a store. So it was.
Did you hire any of the strikers? Did they need?
Oh yeah, money? we hired a lot of them. They all said at the time, I'm never going back to
original store. Their pensions,
most of them ended up going back. We did keep a few good ones from that mix, but it was. I mean, I probably hired literally no less than 100 people over the course of maybe 6-8 months time, just because it was we were basically trying to hire whoever we could get. We were kind of skirting the background checks, and the background check comes back.
I just need human beings.
Not good, and I've got to let somebody go, and then somebody just doesn't work out, so I have to let them go. And we probably were operating on, I don't know, 30 to 40% more staff than we would operate on a normal basis during that time. So
wow.
And then obviously once things started to kind of normalize, then you have to start letting people go again. So there was a whole lot. There was a whole lot about running a store packed into a.
If you could do that,
really
you could do time. You could do anything.
And I actually, and it was good from that standpoint, because I did definitely think during that time, well, this is in a lot of ways brutal. I think I worked probably something like 40 straight days at some point in time without a day off, just because
you got to keep the store going.
Yeah, you just have to keep things going. It's
and you're asking employees to work by 7 days a week. Like the leader needs to be there.
Yeah, and so I definitely during that time felt like, well, if nothing else, this is a good training opportunity for me. This is a good test of my mental fortitude. Like, can I be mentally tough enough to handle going through this?
Did you get overtime too?
No, unfortunately not. I was salaried at the time, so no overtime for us. Mostly the way I looked at it was it just was a good good challenge, good opportunity for me to learn, and I packed a whole lot of learning into a super short period of time.
That's amazing. Okay, so it was Boney's into Henry's, and it was the Henry's store at that time.
It was Henry's during that time,
and then
actually Wild Oats had bought us in somewhere around 99. I think in the late 90s they had acquired us. And this was actually during the point in time at which Wild Oats was really, going from kind of letting us operate as our own division at the time.
We're not going to touch you. You guys are doing a great job.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they were trying to learn our division.
Farmers Market.
It was fairly different than what Wild Oats did. Wild Oats was probably much closer to what a Whole Foods is in terms of
How I Whole Foods probably bought them.
kind of a gourmet type of a store, higher ingredient standards, but lower volume. And we were we were sort of a cherry picking type of store. We were an ad shopper type of store, very much a farmer's market type of a store, really high volume, but very much dependent on, the double ad Wednesdays. And again, that's a double-edged itself. That's like I'm selling, 3-pack strawberries for 99 cents that I'm paying $1.04 for, and then I'm paying, two or three baggers to go in the back and wrap strawberries and wheel them out to the floor, and they're all gone.
But that was the OG
but
style
that was the loss leader style marketing that we did, and that's what we were built on. And so this was all during the time that Wild Oats, kind of had gone from letting us do our thing into, okay, now we've sort of learned what you're all about. How can we take the best of both worlds and merge them together? How can we bring more of what Wild Oats does to you guys, and maybe bring some of what you guys do to Wild Oats? And it was a tough transition for us,
Right.
I think
states' rights were lost.
Yeah, I mean, I think we felt like we were really successful in what we were doing. We did see the numbers, and we were most certainly the moneymakers at that time for the company. And so I think we felt right or wrong, like, what are you doing to us?
Right.
Leave us alone.
I remember
away Wednesday, and now we're hearing from all our customers about it. And from a comp standpoint, we definitely hurt us during that time.
Oh, yeah.
They reversed course pretty quickly. But I think that, I think what I understood later, much more than I understood then, is it's the race to the bottom is a really difficult one, and you're doing a lot of volume, but you're doing a lot of volume at what margin, and it's tough, it's tough to sustain, and
where you make it up for it, applying grocery and other departments, and then it's a shell game in a way.
And I think you fast forward to now, and you see all of the stuff that we've experienced the last 5 years, and man, I can't even imagine trying to sustain that model now. I mean, from a labor standpoint alone, it would be impossible to sustain. So,
and maybe we should give the audience just some background, because you and I grew up in San Diego, right? And so we lived through, from a certain age, where we lived through the whole development of farmers market, which happened here.
Yeah.
Right. I think it was the Henry Boney back in the 40s, but the original stand, I think, over in the college area, or maybe.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And then that turning into a number of Boney stores. And there's a lawsuit within the family that ended up kind of, you guys, creating these Henry's and Boney stores.
Yeah, there was some kind of fracture that took place shortly before probably I started there, even bagging groceries. And then even at that point in time, I really didn't necessarily know or understand exactly what happened. I think I learned a little bit more about that as I sort of grew with the company. But basically, there was a split at some point in time, and the family, so Henry, the founder, the family stores were sort of the corporate stores. And
Got it. Those became the Henry stores.
And there was a base, I think when I started, there was a base of probably 8 or so stores that were corporate stores. And then there was an Oceanside store that was independent, that was one of the sons, and then there were 2 South County stores that were also independent. That was
so the Chula Vista store?
that was I believe another one of the sons, and then at some point in time was
the Cohens bought it.
I think Cohen bought it. So there was always kind of the independent wing that didn't have anything to do with us, but they had the same title. They switched names.
But effectively the same thing though.
When we switched names, I think there was some sort of agreement for them to do that. But the corporate stores, the Henry stores owned by Henry Boney, we opened a few more stores in San Diego County before Wild Oats acquired us.
And so Wild Oats was based, I think, in Boulder.
Wild Oats was based in Boulder. Again, higher end model, more in-house cooking. Yep. More scratch made stuff.
More like Whole Foods. And then they would eventually sell to Whole Foods.
And then they eventually sold to Whole Foods.
And then Sean Boney. Did you know Sean Boney? when he was growing
I mean,
up?
I met him. I didn't,
Okay.
I wouldn't say I knew him, but
Okay.
definitely met him and some of the other
So-
folks who
so-
were in and out of stores.
So he goes to Arizona and then
Mhm.
puts together Sprouts. Essentially, it's like Boney's, Henry's, then
It
Sprouts.
was kind of, yeah, it really was kind of what was the leadership team at the time, which was Sean, Scott Wing at
Yes,
the time
yeah,
was
yeah.
was our CEO.
Oh, Henry's.
At
Okay,
Henry's,
okay.
Kevin Easler as well.
Yeah.
That
I remember
group,
all those
that
guys.
group, I think during that period of time in which we were acquired, they left and started Sprouts out
Yeah.
in Arizona.
Carrying it forward. Essentially, those Sprouts were
They-
very similar to the
Yeah,
Henry stores.
Exactly. They took that old model. They took the true farmers market
Yeah.
model and went out to Arizona and started Sprouts at that time. They had a non-compete for 5 years, I think.
And then, let's go.
And then next thing you knew, Sprouts had ramped up to
Yeah.
all of these stores in Arizona,
Yeah.
Texas, New Mexico.
And then Henry's decided, I think at the time it was Jim Nielsen who would eventually become president of Sprouts. He came out there to open up Henry's stores against the Sprouts stores. It was funny because like almost like this battle of the farmers markets.
Yes,
going on.
there was, and I had friends at Sprouts at the time. There was a point in time that I was considering going out to Sprouts and
Mhm.
making the move and just couldn't make that leap from San Diego out to.
But you got sucked in because then Sprouts bought Henry's, which you were working with at the time?
So by the time Sprouts bought Henry's, I had actually left
Oh, okay.
at that point in time. I probably had left about the year prior to that.
Okay.
And I had left to go to the independent Boney's store. So it was the
Okay.
only Boney's store actually that was left at that point in
So
time.
that's one up in
Oceanside.
Oceanside?
That was owned by Steve Boney.
Okay.
And I had left because, there was a couple of my friends that I'd worked with at Henry's had left and gone there. And there was sort of this loose promise that, hey,
Equity.
Steve's ready to open stores. There may be an
okay.
equity play involved here. So come on board. Let's see what we can do here and
No equity play.
let's make some hay. And then I think within 6 months, he had sold the store to his son, and his son was looking to pay back his dad. And there was, the writing was sort of on the wall that, hey, this is probably not,
Yeah.
the long-term place for me. And then I knew some folks that were working at Jimbo's at the time that I had
Okay.
worked with at Henry's prior. And so.
What year was that?
So when I went to Jimbo's was in 2005 or six.
Okay.
2005 or six. I can't remember which it was, but yeah, just kind of put the word out through some of the brokers that I had relationships with. Hey, I may be looking for an opportunity here, and then so Jimbo's reached out and had some conversations with them, and then signed on board with Jimbo's as an assistant store manager just to get my foot in the door.
Which store?
Started at the Del Mar store,
Okay.
and then moved to the Carlsbad store, and then I got promoted back to store manager back at the Del Mar store.
That was the
2006, 2007.
and that was like the busiest store. So
that was the number one store at the time, although
So Carlsbad.
Carlsbad was
Hmm.
very quickly
yeah.
ascending to pass it in short order in the day.
Yeah. Okay. And then awesome. And then just continuing on the story, I want to make sure the audience follows this too. So eventually, Henry's and Sprouts start going at it, and then Sprouts buys Henry's. And
Yeah.
then they also purchased Sunflower Markets,
Yep.
and then created that. I don't think they purchased anyone else, and then carried forward. And but you missed all that because you went to Jimbo's, which is good.
Yes.
And Jimbo's, you were there, I guess, about 14 years. Does that sound right?
Yeah, Jimbo's, I was there for 14 years. And, what kind of attracted me to Jimbo's was that I think when I was coming up through the ranks at Henry's, it was still very much a family-run organization. I think even for a chunk of time after Wild Oats acquired us, it still operated, a lot the same way. The leadership team was the leadership team, and we were somewhat left alone to kind of operate. So it still very much had that feel, even though we were under the Wild Oats umbrella. And then I think by the time Wild Oats really fully took over, it didn't feel like that same place. And I think Jimbo's had the feel of a place that they had aspirations to open more stores. They had 3 stores at the time, so they were growing, but obviously owned by Jimbo.
Yes.
Jimbo's family. So it's, had that feel of, well, this is kind of what
Yeah.
Henry's used to be.
What you were used to in the old days.
I really appreciated the, the standards that they had, looking at their website, talking to folks that I knew working in the organization.
Yep.
I felt like that was a good fit for me, and it turned out to be a good fit.
And
I stayed there for
a while,
for 14 years.
And just for the audience to know background, I believe Jimbo started in 1984. Does that sound right? And so this is the anniversary, 40 years.
Yes.
Last year was 40 years.
Yes. 2024
was
40
crazy.
years. Yes.
And so Jimbo had borrowed money. He got hepatitis. If you remember this story, and he was supposed to be opening his first store in '84, and he was sick for like 4 months, and he spent all his money on medical bills, and then started Jimbo's. I've heard this story from him many times. It's like with no money, and he built it off the float from the suppliers, and clearly touched on a nerve, like what people were looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I think he had the right thing going at the right time in the right area for sure, and obviously a very smart business person and
smart business person. Yes.
Ran the store himself for I don't even know how long until he handed over the reins. By the time I got to the company, he had a team in place that was kind of managing the day-to-days, but still was always very much involved in the organization. To the point that I don't know if he still does it or not, but to the point where even when I left the company, he approved every single item
they had 5 stores at the time
that came into the store.
Yeah. And Jimbo, just for the audience to know too, he's one of the founding investors that got Infra off the ground, which I believe today is like 600 different locations, 700 locations that now have the ability to negotiate with KE and even Unify and as a kind of a group and have a contract that helps natural retailers across America to be competitive.
Yeah.
And I don't even know how that is really benefited Jimbo beyond just doing the right thing for the world.
Yeah, I mean, so at the time there was, and I think probably still is, there is some benefit because there are deals that he's able to get as part of that group, but much more beneficial to the other members.
One of the bigger ones.
Because Jimbo is big enough that he can negotiate his own deals.
Yeah.
He is on a cost plus program. All those things that honestly, a lot of those other retailers, they wouldn't have an ad if not for the Infra ad.
They wouldn't,
at least at the point in time that I was working for Jimbo's.
And they'd access good point. They have access to additional deals they wouldn't get otherwise, and makes it much more efficient. They have a show every year, I think in like July or something up in Minneapolis. You can attend and meet suppliers. Okay, so you're at Jimbo's, you're running the Del Mar store, and then how do you get into the office?
So I ran the Del Mar store, transferred over to the Escondido store, I think maybe 2008, 2009, somewhere in there. And then I was there for a long period of time, fortunately. And we were so my wife and I were getting married and having kids during that time. We had moved up to the Temecula area. And so that's not bad. So Escondido was actually the closest proximity. And so once I got to Escondido, it was like,
I'm staying.
Don't ever send me, if I can help it, don't ever send me away from this store. And I was there for I had probably 6 or 7 years, and then transferred to the Forest Ranch location, which was the next closest store.
Yeah,
so
it's still another
a little bit farther south,
miles.
But not too bad. And then the opportunity came up to move into the buyer's position, which I had, I think, as I was coming up through the ranks in operations, I think my pathway always felt like it would be in operations leadership.
Yeah.
So like I'm going to be a district manager at some point. So I think at the point in time that I decided, hey, I'm staying in retail for a little while. I think I told myself, hey, I'm going to stay in retail for a little while. I'm going to pursue the next thing, and then probably I'll be satisfied.
And go to law school later.
Yeah, I go to law school later. But I think I always felt like that was kind of going to be my pathway, was operations leadership, district manager, that type of a role. And then at Jimbo's at the time, I think I felt like, okay, I'm running stores. So the next opportunity would be like a general manager overseeing the stores, or a director of operations, but those positions at a small company like Jimbo's
do not open up.
They just don't come up that frequently, but I had been curious about the merchant side of the business. I think there were some things, that I sort of saw and learned over my time that kind of made me curious. We used to do this thing called Wild Stock.
Yes,
when Wild
I remember that.
and this, and it was in Las Vegas every year. Basically, it was this convention, like a 5-day convention, which is like entirely too long to put
and too much alcohol
to put a bunch of retailers in Las Vegas for 5 days. But basically, what it was the senior leadership, the merchant leadership, and then the store level leadership. So like the store manager and the assistant store manager would travel to Las Vegas every year to do this conference. And one of the things that they would do at the conference was, picture like a mini Expo West, but just for the Wild Oats people. And I thought it was awesome. I thought it was like the coolest thing in the world to be able to go around to all these booths, to be able to meet the brands, to try the products. And I think that was kind of my first inkling, like, this is pretty interesting. This would be a pretty cool job to do, but kind of a in my mind, out of my mind type of thought.
But there was a seed planted.
But a little bit of a seed planted. And then Mo Devine, who we both knew very well, unfortunately did pass away
last year.
But I had worked with her, met her at Henry's. I actually met her when she was a broker before she came on board at Henry's. Developed a friendship with her, and then she came on board as a buyer at some point in time, and just always had a friendship with her over the years. And at some point in time, she started talking to me and saying, I think you would be good at this type of role. I think you have a mind for it. I think you should consider, this pathway at some point in time. And I thought, maybe at some point in the future. And then ended up working with her again at Jimbo's. She was the buyer at Jimbo's for a long period of time. Held a few different roles at Jimbo's, but then went into the buyer's position when it first came open. That was when I was actually first interested in the role. But obviously Mo had the backgrounds, had the experience,
totally,
and was a great buyer. So obviously, it made sense to bring her on board in that role. But again, maintain that friendship with her, and again, throughout that time, she always encouraged me. I think you'd be good in a role like this. You should consider this. And at some point in time, she told me that she was going to be leaving the company to pursue that opportunity. Yeah. She really encouraged me to throw my name in the hat. So I did.
So you're like another 20 minutes of driving.
But I mean, I was really excited about the opportunity because, I had been running stores at that point in time for a number of years, probably, 12, 13 years at that point with a couple of different companies. There wasn't really an operational opportunity to move up the ranks at Jimbo's. And so this was the opportunity to do something different. It probably was an opportunity that I wouldn't have necessarily had at another organization because
your background.
The background is all in operations, and that's all great, but
what do you know?
I mean, realistically, I probably wasn't. I would say I was well suited for the role, but my background definitely did not lend itself to me being the best person for that role at that point in time. It probably would have been better served, entering into the merchant side in some kind of a different capacity, maybe working for a buyer, so that I could learn that side of the business.
So you came in running grocery?
So I came in as the grocery buyer. So we had at that point in time, we had the grocery buyer, we had a perishable buyer, and then we had a wellness buyer within the organization. So I had a couple of people within the organization to be able to lean on, but they also had their jobs to do, and everybody was busy, and so it was a little bit trial by fire. It was a pretty steep learning curve for me. It was a whole lot of lingo that I didn't know prior to that. So again, it was another opportunity to learn a lot in a very short period of time. Mo was always a phone call away during that time and was super supportive, and I called her a lot for sure during that time just to understand, like, hey, what is this? What does this mean? What is an MCB? That was kind of the which I was operating, was like, what the hell is an MCB? Explain it to me.
She knew all of those terms.
She did. She was really
rattled them off.
Yes, she could rattle them off.
Yes.
She was a really good buyer. She had done it for multiple companies, and sometimes she knew too much for her own good in terms of trying to explain it to somebody that didn't understand it. But so I took a lot of notes during that time. And
I was about to share my first meeting that I ever had in retail was at Henry's when owned by Wild Oats, and Mo, I think, was in charge of grocery at the time. I was trying to sell her Waleed's pita chips.
Yeah.
If you remember
I
that.
remember Wally's.
Waleed's, yeah, and then it went ballistic. And I remember just taking, and this is before really the internet fully was operational, like, it wasn't usable, at least in our industry. I was like,
Yeah.
MCB, BOGO, an OI, and
Yeah.
I was like making all these notes. I'm like, what does this mean? And I calling different people to help me translate because I didn't want to tell her I didn't know what I was doing. But yeah, so
well, and then there was like, because we had Unify our primary and we had KHE our secondary, and the way they process MCBs is very different.
Yeah.
It was like, well, why is a discount
Different.
equal this?
Perfect reflection. What does perfect reflection
right,
mean?
exactly.
Yeah.
I still don't entirely know what perfect reflection means. I think there's some hidden
yeah,
stuff.
It's not so perfect. I'll just say
in
that
that
about
formula.
reflection.
Yeah, exactly. So that was when I transitioned over to the merchant side of the business. That was in 2017.
Oh, okay. I joined in 2018. So
And you came on board in 2018, and we'd known each other a little bit from my time with Monterey and my time in the stores, but definitely got to know each other better during that.
Under crazy circumstances.
Yes. And then, so a couple of things that happened during that period of time, in addition to, just kind of learning what a buyer does and learning how to try to be an effective buyer, is we relocated the Carmel Valley store in 2019, I think it was.
Right before COVID. Yeah.
Right before COVID hit, we relocated that store, and essentially it was a new store build.
Yeah.
So basically it was like opening a new store.
Yeah. And the same parking lot as your old store.
The same parking lot as the old store, but a brand new build out, a much larger building. I want to say it was probably 60% bigger than the old building.
The old one was like less than 20,000, I think.
Yeah. I think it was 18 or 19,000. The new one was 20. I want to say it was 27.
That sounds right. It was a major increase in space.
So it was a significant project, but again, it was an opportunity for me to do something that I hadn't done in the past, and again, probably something that other roles may have done in a larger organization. And so during that period of time, Justin Jackson had come on board to the company, who had done, he obviously opened a number of stores with different organizations. So a really good resource to be able to, kind of pick his brain and try to take a store from a plan on a blueprint, to the physical reality of the store, and all of the things involved in taking that to, working with the Unify planogram team to try to planogram the store and go through that whole process. And again, it was all stuff that was, it was hours and hours of work. It was trying to figure out things that I hadn't done before. And so probably took me twice as long to figure those things out as it would have taken somebody else in that role. But I was super grateful for the experience to do it, because, then fast forwarding to my role at Mother's, we've opened 3 stores in my time at Mother's, and it was a really good baseline to be able to take that experience.
Like, thank God that Maureen Devine saw that in you, that you moved into the office, so you really have that grocery role, because then that set you up. Right. To do this role at Mother's. Was it hard for you to leave Jimbo's and go to Mother's? Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you leave somewhere that you've been for that long, I think obviously it was a job, but I mean, in a lot of ways it felt like more than that. I mean, family, relationships that I had built up over time. I knew that I was going from an environment that was, at the end of the day, it was Jimbo's company. And I think to have that clarity from an owner who has a mission statement and lives it every single day, clear. I think it's super, super predictable. I think so all those things were good, but I also felt like, I kind of want to get out of the predictability. I kind of want to get out of my comfort zone and get challenged. And I definitely was put out of my comfort zone going from running stores into that buyer role. And I would say from that point in time that I went into the buyer role to the time I left, it was 2.5 years, probably 2.5 years. Yeah. But I mean, the amount of experience that I gained in that
2
Well,
or
it's
2.5
amazing.
years was
Yeah.
probably like a decade's
Right.
experience in terms of the things that I was able to
Well,
do.
you also, being at Jimbo's and the size of the company, you didn't have a lot of resources. So you had to do,
Right.
like in a bigger company, you would have 3 people doing your
Right.
job, or people.
And again, I think it's a double-edged sword. It would be great to have a bunch of support people that you can hand things off to, but then the flip side is, well,
You learned it.
You learn it.
Mhm.
You have to learn it. You have to get good at it, and it sets you up. Just like my store experience set me up. I think that I'm better at my job now because I've run stores. So I understand everything that the store teams are going through. I understand when we screw something up.
Yes.
Exactly what the impact is of our screw up on the store teams. It's not just like we screwed up and we feel bad because we screwed up and we may have cost the company money. It's like
real people,
if you're running
lives.
a store, you're really reliant on teams like ours to hopefully be good at what they do. Otherwise, we're just making their job that much more challenging to operate a store on a daily basis.
And if they become disaffected, then they're not going to be that excited about executing what you're asking them to execute.
Exactly.
Right.
So the next time you have a program and you want to tell the store teams, we got this great new program for you. You don't want them to.
I'll tell you where to put your program, Brian.
To roll their eyes at you for sure. And I think there definitely were pitfalls learning that process at Jimbo's that definitely helped me move over to Mother's. And I think when you move from, if you're coming up through the stores, I always felt like if I was moving from one position and ascending to a new role, I often was more comfortable moving into a new store to do it because I always felt like, well, the growing pains that you have, meaning the mistakes that you've made
throughout your entire career,
and the people that have seen you make those mistakes, not that they're gonna hold it against you forever or anything like that, but I think just your self-perception of those things is such that it's like, okay, well, I've made my mistakes here. I know what not to do. So when I go into a new role and I have a fresh start with fresh people, it's advantageous. And there was the same thing going from Jimbo's over to Mother's, where it's a new environment, there's new people, and there's there's nervousness about that.
What role did you get hired into?
So I went from a buyer at Jimbo's to a senior category manager at Mother's, but on the fresh side of the business. So I actually I was managing at the time was actually deli and produce. And during that point in time, we were actually converting the business. And this is literally right before COVID hit. So I literally start at the beginning of February of 2020. And the decision has already been made at the time that I come on board that we are closing. We were doing self-distribution in produce for decades at Mother's. And the decision has been made.
By the way, we're closing the warehouse.
Right, we're closing the warehouse and we're moving our business to Charlie's Produce to be our produce distribution partner. So that was in motion, but the first thing that I was doing was helping in that transition process.
I think to make sure our margin doesn't go down.
Well, there was an understanding that the margin was in all likelihood going to go down.
Good.
But I also think that we suspected at the time that, well, our margin may not go down as much as we think it's going to go down because there's all of these inefficiencies. And I don't think at the end of the day, we truly know what our costs are.
Okay.
And as it turned out, our margin didn't go down. Our margin actually went up after the transition to
it wasn't being operated that well.
It wasn't. Okay. So one of the first things that I did was build out a proper cost sheet to manage off of, to build out a promotional process and merchandising plan. I was working really closely with Mike Lappin, who's our VP of merchandising, who has a produce background. So I was picking his brain every single day, and he was mentoring me on that process. And then, kind of on the side was trying to manage promotional plans for the deli side of the business. But the warehouse transition was the big one. And we shut down the warehouse. We transitioned over to Charlie's, and within 3 weeks, COVID, which had been sort of building and kind of coming into like the framework, was like boom, like it hit us like a ton of bricks. And the warehouse transition literally saved us because there's no way that we could have continued to self-distribute produce during that point in time. I honestly don't know what would have happened to the business had we still been
Amazing.
trying to distribute produce during that time. It wouldn't have been good. And Charlie's was an awesome partner during that point in time. They were going and buying, they were going and picking up pallets of water,
whatever
to bring into our old warehouse space, just so that we can make sure that we had to stay in stock on water. They were picking up toilet paper for us, so we were doing big buys of toilet paper.
That's beautiful.
So we were trying to tap into all of these.
This is like the importance of a trusted distributor, reliable,
exactly.
Like shows up and prioritize you even during this whole transition. Like you felt you were taken care of.
So
I mean, you look good too. You come in,
I think it made everybody in kind of what was sort of the new leadership group at that point in time. I think definitely it didn't make us look bad.
Right.
For sure.
Right.
But so during that point in time, we had transitioned the warehouse, COVID had hit, and then probably somewhere during that summer, Mike and Paul, our leadership team, came to me and said, "Hey, we need you to transition over to grocery now." It was a little murky, I would say, what was happening on the grocery side of the business and what the leadership structure was going to kind of be at that point in time. And it started as me and another guy were sort of sharing the responsibility.
So who's responsible?
I think ultimately it was made clear that I was going to have the final say on what we were going to do from a merchandising standpoint, from a pricing standpoint. We were trying to build out our ad at that point in time, and so we had just launched into having a grocery ad, having a vendor funded grocery ad, and we were trying to build that out. And so that was
interesting because Jimbo's with your stores already had.
So it was, in a lot of ways, it was like, in some ways it was going forward in time. From sort of like a technology standpoint, I would say we probably were a little bit more advanced.
A number of stores, and
but in a lot of ways it was going back in time. So basic things that you would think that we probably would have had that we had already built up at Jimbo's, like a proper vendor funded ad, we didn't necessarily have, or we didn't have in an effective way.
Consistent.
And so we were going through that process. We were going through the process of trying to clean up dead weight inventory in the stores. We were over skewed on the grocery side of the business. And one of the first things that we did was we said, well, we've got all of these tailwinds of COVID. And we've already identified some inventory that we need to purge out of the business. Like, when are we ever going to have this opportunity? So let's just hurry up and dive in. So we literally discontinued 2,500 grocery SKUs during that time, basically in the middle of the summer during COVID. And we just used the lift of COVID to just purge through all of that inventory. We probably replaced those with between 300 and 400 SKUs that we identified we were missing in the business that over the next 52 weeks did probably 3 or 4 times the sales dollars of the 2,500 SKUs. And again, it was like, we wouldn't have had the opportunity, during a normal state of affairs, but because we had the tailwinds from COVID, we said, well, shoot, let's
do it.
Let's dive right in and take advantage.
I think a lot of retailers took advantage of that in great ways. I'm thinking of Sprouts and Jack Sinclair is his name. Sprouts is the CEO over there. He's like, we're aiming to double out Wednesday. We're aiming for consumers who are more looking for like this, not the value in terms of low price, but the value in terms of ingredients and product. So those transitions, that's a major transition.
So some of the things that Wild Oats was trying to accomplish.
That's what he did
20 years ago, 25 years ago, whatever it was. I totally see the value in what they have done there this last year or so. And well, I guess this last few years, really since COVID hit. And I've kind of seen from a distance some of what they're doing and totally get it. Totally support and see the wisdom in
it's
it.
So interesting.
Because if you can get to the other side of that, and you've kind of grown yourself beyond sort of that cherry picker customer. Not that you don't appreciate those customers.
But they don't really appreciate you. They appreciate only for the cherry picking.
Exactly. Like, you don't want the, like, no offense to the little old lady who's walking around with your ad.
But
it's kind of like, that's not
Right.
Like at the end of the day, like that's not
How
the
do you
customer that we're trying to sort of build our business off of.
Right.
Like she's buying all the things that we're not making money on.
But it's interesting that Mothers is kind of doing the same thing. They're like, okay, like we're like, you have the cover, the supply chains are destroyed. Who knows why we don't have products? Like, and it actually was the right thing for the business.
Yeah, and I think there was so our old CFO at Wild Oats during during the transition process when Wild Oats was really trying to sort of fully integrate Henry's into what they were doing, would say price does not equal value. And as somebody who was like 21, 22 years old at the time, I didn't fully understand what he was going after, and we didn't necessarily. I think we were moderately successful trying to transition to an extent away from, what Henry's used to be and
hyper loss leader.
Yeah. And to something that was a little less that, but we didn't fully transition away from that in my time at Henry's. But I think, I do think back to that all these years later, and it's true. Price, value is not the way that I would put it is value, and it's not price dependent is really the way that I would put it. So I may see value in something that costs $5 that you might find for $3 in a conventional store. But if I'm willing to spend the $5, that's the value item to me. And I may not see the value in the $3 item because it's not what I want at the end of the day.
But I think maybe Wild Oats missed is that they were limiting double add ones that are moving away from the loss leaders, but they really didn't re-itemize or do things that fundamentally change the value equation for the consumer, right? I think that's what Sprouts has done more recently. Is they identified that we don't necessarily want to build our business on the backs of like the cherry picking consumer, but we also wanted to offer them even more.
Well, there were some things that happened that I would say were a little disjointed during that whole period of time. So you have the transition happening, and you're literally the company literally is trying to go full speed ahead with transitioning Henry's into something that is closer to Wild Oats. And then you have the grocer strike hit during that period of time, and we were bringing in things like Arrowhead water 24 packs that we hadn't carried in the past. We were bringing in Orange Crush was like the classic example of somebody had some Nielsen reporting that told them that these are the top items in conventional grocery. We have this opportunity with these conventional shoppers that are shopping us that normally don't. So we want to meet them where they're at. And we want to offer them things that they will find in conventional grocery stores. Well, the problem is we couldn't really price them right. We turned off our customer base because those were things they didn't want.
And you confused them.
We're not shopping Henry's to buy or Clorox or Orange Crush soda. And we went and built these big end caps with these items, and customers were totally turned off. And the conventional shoppers didn't really buy them either because they actually saw it as an opportunity, I think, let's find out what Henry's has to offer. And as it turns out, there's all of these different things that I can buy in a Henry's that I don't buy in a conventional grocery store. And I can still go to like a Target, maybe a Target or a Smart and Final or someplace like that to buy my toilet paper, my soda, my Coca-Cola, if that's something that I have in my household. And so we had to sort of pivot off of that and go back to, okay, that didn't work. So you had sort of this conflicting messaging going on that we're trying to go.
What is your brand promise?
Then we're actually offering products that are actually like here in terms of kind of the hierarchy of what would be considered a premium product.
But it also misses like the way distribution is done in the natural channel versus conventional. In conventional, some of that might be DSD off of a Coke truck, and you guys had to bring it in through, in many cases, these other products in through
So we were bringing it through our produce warehouse. So we owned a produce warehouse in Riverside at the time that served the Orange County, San Diego stores, and then eventually the Arizona stores when we started opening stores out there. So we brought them in through our produce warehouse, but still, you have to get them delivered. You have to put them on a produce truck. You have warehouse people managing that product. And so, we couldn't at the end of the day get it and sell it, and conventional grocers, I don't know what their margin is on Coca-Cola, but it's not, it's not their margin money maker for them. So it's, much less so for us.
Right.
And
It was more a way
trying to
people
mix
in the
out the
store.
grocery margin, selling those products for below what our normal margin was, but still
Why?
selling them at a higher
Yeah.
retail than they would find in conventional grocery. It just wasn't
Yeah.
a model for
So interesting how
success.
this all played out. Okay, so
But that little nugget during the time that I was working in the stores, I think I drew on in later years in what I'm doing now because
interesting.
well, just it was a way of sort of reinforcing that number one, price does not necessarily equal value. Two, that customers shop our stores for a reason. So when I hear people say meet customers where they're at, I think there's truth in that. But it doesn't mean bring Coca-Cola into your store if you're a natural foods retailer. And so just thinking back to that experience of seeing firsthand and hearing firsthand of just how turned off the Henry's customers were at the fact that we would even dare bring those types of products into our store. And we didn't, Henry's didn't have in those days necessarily the cleanest product standards.
No,
I would say we had
a lot of red 40
perception much more than we had the reality of being a clean store. But that perception was important to our customers, and we messed with it by bringing in
the trust,
Orange Crush, bringing in the bleached, toilet papers and paper towels and things like that.
And that went on afterwards. Jean Roswell.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So Jean Roswell was like, I think she was an actor at some point too, but he would do these commercials you see on TV, and it was like the "We Got That" commercial. And it'd be like he'd be walking through the store and like finding the Coke and all these different things. And we got that. But caught my attention, I guess, is when Sprouts bought Henry's. That was eliminated. They eliminated all of like the Americana products. It really became natural. Yeah. Or more natural. Yeah. And definitely wouldn't have Coke or Orange Crush on a shelf. So I think they figured out that that's, to your point, the consumer wanted. So what is, for our listening audience, what is Mothers? What does it stand for?
Well, Mothers was founded in the 70s by yoga people, basically.
Crunchy granola yoga people.
Yeah, crunchy granola yoga people who wanted a natural foods store, and they wanted to be able to lean heavily into vitamins and supplements. Yep. Did not carry any meat products during that period of time. And so essentially Mothers was I guess somewhere a cross between sort of like a Henry Sprouts and maybe like a Whole Foods, probably a little bit cleaner ingredient standards than a Sprouts, but maybe not quite to the level of at least what the old days version of Whole Foods might have been, or a Wild Oats, or certainly a Jimbo's. And then over time, I would say the business was really strongly built on vitamins and supplements with some deli, some center store grocery, which grew over time. But really the bread and butter was vitamins and supplements, and then kitchens that were in the store. So they had restaurants that were actually in the stores. So that was kind of the claim to fame of Mother's Market and Kitchen. Which we're still technically called, but we've sort of tried to morph more toward the Mother's Market. Yeah. But basically that's what Mother's was, and was built on, a higher standard of ingredients, cleaner foods, non-conventional products. I think at different points in time over the years, depending on the leadership, there's been some intermixing of some more conventional products that have found their way into the stores and then have been pushed back out the door. And if you look at the last 10 years, the company has gone through a few different leadership changes. And I would say within this last 4 to 5 years, we've tried to bring things back to, founding principles in terms of our food standards, in terms of the types of products that we want to sell in the store. And then we've leaned much more heavily into meat and seafood to try to make it sort of a complete shop type of a store. We've scaled back a little bit from the kitchens, so we still have restaurants in a few of our stores, but we've eliminated them in some of the stores where they just didn't make sense for the stores, and we've gone to we still do a lot of stuff in house, but we'll prepackage it, put it out in tiny cases and sell it that way.
And how many stores do you have?
So we have 11.
Okay. And you run vitamins, all of grocery. Do you also still do meat department?
Yeah, meat and seafood falls under center store. So it's center store grocery, perishables, meat and seafood.
Okay.
We don't have butchers, so we're not cutting meat in our stores. We're partnered with a local partner who does do full processing. Most of what we sell is under our mother's logo. So we full grass-fed beef, all organic chicken.
But no conventional chicken. Everything's
no
organic.
Conventional chicken.
Nice.
Everything is organic, sustainable seafood. So again, going after that higher attribute in meat and seafood. And even though we don't have butcher shops, I mean, we've built what would be probably the closest thing to like a real meat and seafood business within our stores without having
a low labor model.
That countertop butcher and with a fraction of the labor involved there. And then as of last year, I picked up vitamins and body care,
which is like the original core of the store.
Yes. So we are going through a process right now where we're trying to sort of right size our wellness departments to the amount of business that we do out of that area of the store. Obviously, there's been some erosion over time from online retail and still very much a big part of our store, but we're in the process of trying to right size the assortment.
What is the solution to that? I mean, with people going and being subscription models direct to consumer from these vitamin brands or just being on Amazon subscription models, and is there a solution?
Well, I mean, I guess I would say in all fairness, I'm probably still trying to figure out if there's a solution and if so what that solution is. I mean, I think among the solutions, among the things that we have that we can do now that still keep us competitive in the space is there's obviously still the service component that we offer that Amazon doesn't offer. So you can come into our stores and talk to people who are truly knowledgeable of those products where, and you can get a lot of information out of Google, but I also think it's super helpful if you're trepidatious about trying something new to actually go and talk to somebody who has a lot of experience with those products and is truly knowledgeable.
That'll be find the right one for you.
And hopefully can kind of talk you through what you're looking for and help you find your way to the right product. So, I mean, that's obviously the biggest piece that we offer that online retail doesn't. And then obviously, it's on the shelf today. It's right in front of you. And so if you're going to the store to buy your groceries anyway, I think we've been going through a process of trying to determine where we should price ourselves up against brick and mortar competitors, but also up against online retail. And more, obviously, we have to pay attention to online retail. At the end of the day, I'm generally not going to be able to be as cheap as Amazon, but if it's a difference of maybe $1 or $2 on something that is $40 already and it's here. And I have to wait until tomorrow or the next day to get to Amazon. Probably I'm not waiting, probably I'm buying it in the store. So if we can be compelling enough on price, if we can be really compelling when we're on promotion, and we offer that service piece, I think those are the ways in which we can compete. And then the other thing that we're leaning into heavily is our private label. So private label was something that the last probably 18 months on the grocery side of the business, we really ramped up with pretty huge success. I think we went into that wondering, can we do private label? We obviously understand, especially during the COVID environment that just was massively disruptive to the supply chain. What are we going to do at the end of the day as we try to recover the supply chain, which still hasn't recovered? Ultimately, what's going to differentiate us? What's going to help us sort of own our inventory a little bit better than we own our inventory now was looking at the private label side of the business. And then hopefully that can help us further define what we are compared to competitors in the market, including online retail. So we've done that with, I would say, pretty huge success on the relatively small group of items and categories that we've pursued on the grocery side of the business. And so, one of the first things that we looked at when wellness kind of came under my umbrella was, okay, well, what opportunities do we have to further that on private label? So we have a lot of the same private label that virtually every other natural foods retailer, if they have
protein
vitamins.
powders.
So yeah, so
Yeah.
you know, all of the pill bottles that certain
Oh, like
manufacturers make.
Jimbo's has.
They make them for Jimbos, they make them for
Yeah.
Sprouts, they make them for Mothers,
Got
they make them for all of these guys. So what can we do that's a little bit differentiating from that stuff that hopefully elevates us? So we're not like the cheaper version of vitamin C on the shelf, the cheaper version of protein on the shelf, but what is similar to what we did on the meat and seafood side is we actually elevated our attributes. In doing so, we actually raised our retails in a lot of cases. But again, going back to that value conversation, that's what customers were looking for. And it's similar on the wellness side of things. And so we just launched a high performance living line is what we're calling it, which is sports nutrition products. And we've changed the label from what we've done in the past. And we
really exciting.
We went after things that were a better quality of product than we had under our private label previously. And so that's the other area that we're going after. That again, if we're talking about competing with online retail, if you're gonna find something that you can differentiate yourself from being able to just go to Amazon and get it tomorrow and get it for cheaper, you can't get Mother's products on Amazon, but
yet.
Yeah, exactly. But part of that is what product are you selling under that banner? And it's not good enough to just sell the same thing that everybody else offers.
There's no differentiation.
There's probably a strong argument in a lot of cases are of a lesser quality than some of the big brand names. So how do we get on par with, from a quality standpoint, what some of those big brands offer, but something that is truly ours and we can truly control it, and we're not having to compete with these guys on price.
I love that. I love where you're headed.
So those are kind of the different buckets that we're pursuing, but it's very much a work in progress, very much still a learning curve.
And I heard you taking that over. I was like,
sink my teeth into that side of the business.
I know how innovative you are, so I was curious what you were doing, and I think that private label approach is great. I've thought about like when it makes sense to have, even have eventually we'll do this eventually, where it could be almost like a white label 3PL that would fulfill stuff from Mothers. So you're meeting them, you're going to the Mothers website, and then things could actually be fulfilled from that site, and they could be a subscription from ostensibly Mothers, and it makes sense. And even in the store levels, could the vitamin manufacturers produce more like almost like sample sizes that are $10, $5, $10, $20 versus like $30, $40, $50 to give someone an opportunity to sample, to try, to learn, and then be able to become a customer.
So we've done a version of the 3PL that you described with pretty limited success. So we've kind of scaled back from that just because we weren't doing it very well. But it's still very much something that I think we can be successful if we can figure out the right partner, if we can figure out the right way to manage it. I think to be sort of that answer to an Amazon in the natural space.
And I'm even noticing now that there's even websites through Shopify where you're paying by Amazon on that D2C website, and then it's actually still fulfilled by Amazon because they're obviously super efficient, but it still is like your store. And so it's interesting. It's such an interesting area. When I was at Jimbo's as president, I'd walk around the vitamin department and just be like, what are we going to do? Like, we have so much space. We have these dedicated people that are helping to educate. And then my customers are going right on to Amazon and buying this. And it's like, so they're in the middle of it. So moving on to other subjects, and maybe our final one, what do you, in terms of, like, you cover entire areas of the store, most of the store actually, geographically right now, what are you most excited about? What department, what sub-department do you see the most happening there that makes you go, wow, this is exciting?
Well, I mean, I guess in some ways, just because of the newness of it and because of the challenge of it, wellness, even though it's sort of counterintuitive from the standpoint of it is, if we're just being honest, a shrinking portion of our business. We're trying to we're trying to make it not shrink as fast, I guess I would say.
Or
So,
optimize it.
yeah, so in a lot of
Yes.
ways, that's exciting because I think so the private label, the segment of items in private label that we just launched, I think is an opportunity for a proving grounds that, hopefully proves a hypothesis that,
Yeah.
hey, if we go after private label in a more intentional way as a separator to online retail or
Yeah.
retail and some of our brick and mortar retail competitors, we think that we can succeed. So I think that, for a lot of reasons, that's
Cool.
the most exciting
Yeah.
that's going on, just because
It's a new shiny thing for
the
you.
challenge of it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I love it. And will you be walking Fancy Story will happen by the time we publish this? How about Expo? Will you be walking Expo?
I will be walking Expo for sure, and Fancy Food as well, yeah.
Okay.
Which is next week in Las Vegas, which is another area that is under my umbrella, the specialty business. And that was actually another one that we really went after in a more significant way.
Yeah, that wasn't very strong before. That's huge.
No, I mean, I think it again, a little bit similar to meat and seafood. It was like, well, we're gonna have some options of some gourmet cheeses.
Check some boxes.
Because we should have it. Stores like ours should have it, but
how do you lead?
we don't really manage it in a significant way. We're not really experts in it. And our labor model is such that we're not gonna have cheesemongers in the stores. We're not gonna be doing a full cut and wrap in store program. Like, I go to a place like Whole Foods, and just as like a retail guy and also as somebody who loves cheese and loves specialty, it's like I get super jealous of what they can do, but there's ways that we can do that effectively, certainly much more effectively than we've done in the past.
Sure.
And we can be in the game, and in those situations, we just really leverage in this case, we've really leveraged GFI, who's our primary partner and specialty, to really help the store teams from a knowledge perspective, from a signage perspective, help us manage the assortment, help us manage the promotional program, so that we can have as close a version to, a high-end cut and wrap cheese program under our labor model that we can accomplish.
That's awesome. I actually didn't think I was fully aware that you were using GFI. Have you met Brian Scott?
Yep.
Okay, great team.
Yep.
I toured their facilities, extremely modern on it. Great partner.
Brian's awesome. They're an awesome partner. They're another partner that we've actually teamed up with things that are outside of sort of their core competency.
Yeah.
They're a little bit like Charlie's on that side of the business. They're a willing partner, and very much a mindset of, well, it's not what we do now, but we'll sort of figure it out. So
yeah, I love that. Well, awesome. Brian, thank you for spending this time with me today.
Thank you. It was awesome. It was my pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. We did it. This is our second time doing it. I think we get better every time. So maybe we delete this one and we'll start over again. It'll be good.
Hopefully this one takes.
Yeah, I think it will. I hope everybody enjoyed today's episode. Brian, always grateful for your friendship and for you being here. And let's go grab some dinner.